So we're live.
We are live.
Sweet. I'm trying to realize, is this your professional background or is this the actual background in your house?
This is actually the background of my office. So, hey,
Your office?
Yeah, this is my office space, right? So, hey, what's
Love
up,
it.
everybody? We have Andre here from Taboola. We're gonna, do this for about an hour here. We're gonna chat kind of native in general, Taboola innovations, all the exciting stuff that's happening with Taboola. He's going to give a ton of successful tips for how to scale in Q1. I know Q4 is fun for everybody on the networks, but we're kind of getting close to that and getting ready for some big Q1 planning. So everyone, this is Andre. Andre, I'm not even going to try to pronounce your last name. I apologize in advance, but please introduce yourself to the group.
Hello, everyone, guys. I'm Andrei. We can say Andrei Kravchenko. It's a long Ukrainian surname. It's great to be on this webinar. Sorry, I'm a little bit out of breath because I was just telling Joe, I'm in the mountains with my family, with my partner. So I was running around and telling anyone to switch off their YouTube, switch off their Zooms to maximize my chances of having a successful webinar and a trouble-free internet connection. So so what we're going to do is I have to do a very quick pitch of Taboola just for those who are getting started. So not for those who are seasoned with native, even though the group's called Native Advertising Gurus. So we're going to kickstart with a very brief introduction of Taboola, how to work with it, what kind of tiers of support do we have. Again, for those of you who know this, apologies. I promise not to take too much of your time, but then eventually we'll proceed to some more hands-on recommendations, how to work out your test budget recommendations, some creative tips on how to build your landing page, what to focus on the creatives. So general stuff, not very Q1 specific, but still nevertheless quite useful for anyone, regardless where you're just getting started or if you're a seasoned affiliate and arbitrager. After that, we'll talk about some verticals to explore in Q1, focusing on those that are evergreen, which you can run pretty much anytime, and on those that are specifically good for testing, launching, scaling in Q1. Shall we kickstart?
Perfect. And guys, if you have questions, specific questions you want to ask, we're going to try to leave about 10, 15 minutes at the end. Start adding those to the comments on the live chat. And Andre and or myself will try to go through those one at a time. So they can be specific, they could be general. Feel free to just say hello on the live chat as well. Good to see people here. Andre, man, kick it off. Let's see how it goes.
Yeah, I want to say thanks everyone for joining. Unfortunately, I don't see you guys in the chat because I'm just in my Zoom, so I don't see what's happening on Facebook or any other chats. But feel free to shoot questions. It's not just a monologue. Joe, if you get any consistent questions about a specific topic, please feel free to interrupt me. Let's make this interactive as possible. But again, meanwhile, I'm reading this, I'm talking about this, but in the end, we're going to leave 20, 15 minutes on a Q&A session. Right, let's go.
Let's go, man. Kick it off.
Cool. Can you see my screen?
It's popping up right now. Yep. We got a guy in a funny Christmas hat. So
exactly. So as you can see, it's almost me. I was trying to make it a bit Christmassy. Hopefully
it's the season, right?
It is the season. It's this time of the year again. All right, cool. So we're going to kickstart with a very brief introduction of Taboola. So for those of you who don't know, Taboola is a native advertising platform, or the way we position ourselves, a content discovery platform. So if you're trying to figure out what kind of niche am I talking about, it's 20% of the time that people are spending on the open web, meaning they don't spend time on social, they don't spend time on streaming, they don't spend time shopping, they spend time directly on the websites. And so it happens 20% of the time that users interact with something on the internet, with content, is on the websites directly. And so it happens, Taboola is the biggest partner for the monetization on the open web. That means we monetize largest publishers on the internet, and we can be found below the article. So in short, what it means for affiliate marketers and arbitragers is that you get access to massive amounts of traffic. We'll talk about it in a second, with placements located most of the time below the article, which are very impactful. We call it the moment of next, when people are more internet users, are more recipient and receptive to new content and new recommendations. And finally, one of the know-hows is that these partnerships with publishers are exclusive, meaning there is no one else who can access this type of inventory besides those who are using Taboola.
Hey, Andre, to stop you here, this is interesting for me. So
Please.
going back, I mean, native used to just be, 6 to 8 or 4 ads at the bottom of the page, with a box around it. How much of your inventory is now like the in feed versus the, very like, exclusive type content versus how all of it in the past was just at the bottom of the page?
So it's a bit tricky. So originally Taboola was built just to be below the article. Mm-hmm. Obviously, we're looking for expanding the inventory, and sometimes you can find some mid-article recommendations. And if you buy programmatically, you can access so-called high-impact placements, which are not just below the article and sometimes mid-article. These are so-called prime time placements or homepage recommendation placements. This can be accessed by high-impact placement packages, which you can request from your account manager if you're already working with us. This would be bought via a PMP, so private marketplace, accessible via our programmatic partners. So think TV360, for instance, which we have an exclusive agreement with. So by exclusive, I mean there are no intermediaries between us, like BidSwitch, for instance. So you can buy straight from TV360, Taboola inventory.
That's amazing. Now, is that like something where a typical media buyer can access it, or is that only going to be for like, a large scale agency spending millions of dollars?
No, I mean, like if you're buying DV360, there is honestly, like there is not even need to open an account with Taboola because you'll be buying via a private marketplace. That means you just need to reach out to your sales rep and request a PMP, which would be, specifically single out so-called, let's call it approved list of super premium publishers that are approved with Google. And you would have a reserved seat ID, which you would include in your DV360 account, and you'd be able just to click one big red button and access this inventory from your DV360 dashboard. So it's pretty straightforward. Yeah, no, it's amazing. Like the only downside I can think of is the fact that you're buying via CPM. So with CPM, you have less flexibility when it comes to optimization, because obviously when you're buying CPC, you can play around with your VCTR, which would obviously allow you to decrease your CPC in the long run, especially if you're really good with optimizing.
But it's all the same. CPM, CPC, it's all the same math, right? I mean, I think
I know
everyone in this group is looking at a CPA-based, campaign anyway, so they're going to reverse engineer those numbers any way you look at it.
Yeah, absolutely. But like, again, the majority of advertisers, and I've been in the company for a little less than 5 years, the majority of performance advertisers we're dealing with, they don't really rely on DV360. That's mostly something that branding agencies are doing. But again, if you're incredibly eager to split test, we can discuss this. But in my opinion, it's always better to buy directly because A, it's cheaper. Because when you're buying, for instance, programmatically, you have a floor price, means it's fixed per inventory. And, in some cases, fixed can be cheaper than Vice's dynamic option. But in most of the cases, if you optimize, you'd be able to decrease your overall CPC, keeping your CPM at relatively the same level and keeping it very competitive.
I love it. Cool. And sorry to cut you off. I find that stuff super
No worries. And I feel like, I answered a lot of other questions besides the main question, which is what's the numbers? And unfortunately, I don't have like the answer about the numbers as in like, okay, 95% below the article, 5% mid article. If there is interest in this information, I can try to pull it. But in general, I would say think of Taboola as below the article recommendations platform that has some additional benefits as in mid article and homepage.
I'd be curious to know with like the click-through rates vary by the placements, like the conversion rates. I mean, I don't know if that's on the roadmap down the road to be able to see that information, but that's just cool. I mean, again, we're all about every click matters. So if we can find ways to maximize our performance, we're going to be doing that. So anyway, go ahead. I'll stop cutting you off.
We had some performance advertisers who were buying this high-impact placements just to ensure that their CTRs are higher, because obviously on homepage, you would naturally think that the VCTRs would be higher because this is something that's incredibly clickable. But what matters in this case is split testing versus relevant contexts, because sometimes, it can be a context of relevant article and you're below the article and people are like, okay, that's a generally good recommendation, which is right at the right time and the right place. Whilst homepage is just an aggregate of all sorts of news, which may or may not be relevant to what you're trying to promote. So it's a bit of a gamble, but you're right. It's definitely more clickable, but it's the low post-click performance that matters. Sorry, low post-click performance that matters.
Cool, man. Anyway, Gary, go ahead.
Yeah, moving on. So we mentioned the reach. It's 500 million people daily active users that we reach across all the countries that you can think of. So if you need any traffic in any geo, you can access it via either our local publishers. Let's give you an example. Say BuzzFeed. It's mostly US-based advertiser. Obviously, they have some global traffic, but predominantly you would think of it as a US publisher. Whilst you would have MSN Weather Channel, which is so-called global partners, meaning that allow us to access traffic in pretty much any geo around the world. And one thing to mention is that we're trying to go for quality versus quantity. It's two generally good approaches, but we opted in for the quality approach. That means we don't have hundreds of thousands of publishers. We have about 9,000 publishers, but these are publishers that are the largest ones in the world and that have chosen to work with us, as I mentioned, on exclusive terms. So what it matters for advertisers is that in the majority of cases, you shouldn't start a conversation by saying, give me a whitelist, give me an approved list or a blacklist. It's a good practice for networks that has thousands and thousands of publishers, and you really need to pick out the best ones. In our case, we're already working with the biggest ones, and let's assume the best ones. So an approved list and a blacklist, they can work for you in some cases, but it shouldn't be something that you should rely on from the very beginning. It's always better to start collecting your own approved list. I feel like this is an important slide because it gives an idea to those who don't know how to work with us, how to do this. Because I get a lot of requests from clients who are like, oh, okay, you know what? We started working with Taboola and we're getting zero support. And I'm like, okay, why? And they're like, oh, we just kicked off and opened an account via self-service. I'm like, okay, well, that's it. You're in self-service. Mm-hmm. Self-service means that you're getting close to zero support. Or maybe if you're lucky, someone's in general support department replying to you once a month. And it's fair because in order for you to get personalized and dedicated account manager, you either need to be approached or you need to first show some spend, which is the same approach across, pretty much any ad network, Google, Facebook, or everyone else. So if we put self-service aside for a second, we have two other tiers of support. One of them is enterprise, and that's predominantly branding agencies or massive brands with more than 200-300 employees headcount-wise. Now, the one department that I represent is called Growth, or SMB/mid-market. So this is a very dynamic department that focuses on performance advertisers, and it's very relevant to the companies that have less than 200 employees in their organization. So you would think that enterprise is an organization that requires reactive support because they have a bunch of stakeholders, right? And they have a lot of questions, and you need to be very reactive to these questions. Whilst with smaller organizations, you tend to have maybe 1-2 decision makers, and it's a very dynamic organization, very flexible. So you have lots of things to take care of. So they always require nurturing, they require being taken care of. And this means proactive approach. And this is something that we are aspiring to do. So very proactive department, and we're working with performance advertisers mostly.
Yeah, I think most people watching this and in our group are probably going to fall in that umbrella. I mean, obviously, some are spending enterprise type spend. There's guys that I know personally that are spending a small portion.
Don't think of it as money. Money is not the main qualifier here. It's the amount of, it's the headcount, mm-hmm. and it's the general approach. So if you're an affiliate, search arbitrager, let's say, and a performance agency that's under, let's say, smaller side of things, headcount wise, the chances are you're going to fall in the growth department. But if you're already working with the enterprise department, doesn't mean that you're getting the wrong type of support. Doesn't mean this. It just means that, so it happens you probably started with the department that qualified you as enterprise. And what matters here is that you're getting the support that you want.
Yeah, no, we're in my agency, those that don't know, I own a digital agency with a native focus, and we are in the growth department. And, honestly, the support has gotten a lot better over the years. I mean, 3, 4, 5 years ago, honestly, I felt the support was lacking, and it's something that's changed. Now we've got very responsive reps who are very on top of our campaigns. We're able to answer questions and handle most things in an extremely timely manner. So, I mean, kudos to you guys for, putting the focus there, because it's definitely helped us to be more, a more successful.
Thanks very much, Joe. No, thanks very much, Joe. I think, first of all, it's worth mentioning that the department was just created a little more than a year ago. So we've started aiming for personalization relatively at that time frame. And secondly, like, the reason you're getting better support is because the sales reps, obviously they come and go, but the core of the organization, they stay, they gather their experience working with agencies, with affiliates and arbitrageurs, and everyone's aspiring to be, to possess as much of relevant skill set and experience as possible. So, 3-4 years ago, we didn't have the relevant department that would focus on supporting this type of advertisers like yourself. And secondly, they may not have been enough experienced to speak the same language, but I'm glad that it's, the situation's improving continuously.
Yeah, I would say, you guys are, among the better managed agency or networks out there in terms of like reps being responsive and answering questions and all that, where again, a couple of years ago wasn't that way. So, but yeah, this again, kudos. It helps us to be more successful when we can get our questions answered in a timely manner. And I'm sure lots of people in this group have, similar stories.
No, that's awesome. And you know what? I'll tell you a secret, which is not a secret because this is being listened by quite a few people. We started being responsive on Slack. So not just on emails.
That's awesome. That's huge. I mean, I would say we use Slack internally. We use Slack externally with our clients. So, just to have a Slack channel for Taboola is huge. I'm going to talk to my rep about that right away.
Yeah, it's very convenient. I agree with you. I mean, it may not be necessarily possible to sustain for all this. Let's say, I have a couple of hundred clients in my book of business. So it's not sustainable for every single one of them, but we're aspiring to provide the same level of support to the majority of them.
Good for you guys. It's awesome.
Cool. Okay, there's way too many animations for a single piece. There we go. Cool. So this is Taboola Backstage. So the majority of you have probably shifted towards Taboola Ads, which is a superior platform to Backstage. But the reason I have this slide is because we haven't really updated it. So I have only this one, but it doesn't really matter. What matters is that we have a really cool dashboard where you have an ability to view all the metrics in one place, especially if you're tracking things and you're sending them via S2S, postback, cool stuff. You can see it all in one place. You can control it. You can connect it to your own CRM or optimization tool via API in case this is something that you're doing. But for me, the most important part is transparency, because you can see all the publishers and you can access them. You can click and see how the placements look like. And sometimes you can even see how your own ad looks like in this particular publisher, which may not sound too impressive for those who have been using Taboola for a very long time. But, having worked with quite a few advertisers from Eastern Europe, for instance, they keep mentioning that the networks that they're working with, they tend to show IDs versus the actual names with no possibility to click through, which could be a deal breaker, especially if you're aspiring for brand safety. Let's say you're a brand owner versus affiliate and you want, very specific placements. So we give this type of flexibility. Cool.
Absolutely.
So to something a bit more specific, not necessarily nitty-gritty at this stage, but I think more relevant to those of you who are seasoned. So geographies to explore. Quite a lot of advertisers, when they're starting with Taboola, they're aspiring to be in the US, which is a wonderful geo, but something to keep in mind, especially during Christmas, that it's incredibly competitive, because this is where we have the majority of traffic, more than 100 million daily active users. But this is also where the majority of advertisers are promoting. So with the same amount of inventory, but a constantly growing amount of advertisers, it's only natural to assume that, the CPCs would be very competitive, especially during the holiday season. So keep this in mind.
I love this slide. I love this slide.
Yeah.
So my agency, we probably 90% of our business is US right now. And I want to change that because of this slide, right? And I think there's so much opportunity, outside of the US with significantly cheaper CPCs and CPMs. And the deals that we've had outside the US have quite honestly been so much easier to make work, because you're paying, a fraction of the cost. And if you can even have that barrier for entry in terms of being able to translate languages, there's so much opportunity to scale on those geos. So, this is an awesome slide and one that, again, this gets me that kick in
Thanks.
the butt to want to go more international.
Let's do it. Let's discuss this offline. Let's take this offline. But I think something important to keep in mind is you always need to be not you specific, but whoever is reading this, you need to be holistic with your approach. And if you think in the US as the ultimate goal, you may be right, but keep in mind that there are lots of other countries which have very similar buying power of consumers. So same amount of money, same logic, same mentality, same love for similar type of products. So you shouldn't necessarily just aim for the US. This is arguably where the majority of money is concentrated. But with the same language, you can approach and try to penetrate Australia and Canada or the United Kingdom, where we also have tons of great traffic, and the users there, they have relatively the same amount of money and interest in your products.
Yep, I was able to scale some campaigns in some of these geos listed here. And again, it was just easier, and not because, the buying was any different. It was just significantly cheaper from the CPC standpoint. So the numbers were able to work out better. 6 years ago on Taboola, the rates in the US were nowhere close to they are right now, which is, good and bad. Good that you guys are making more money and there's more, eyes on it, but bad from a performance standpoint. You got to work harder for it. But that being said, I think this slide's super important.
No, I agree with you. It is definitely more challenging to maintain the same margins. But think of it in these terms. You're buying on a CPC basis, but you need to have high VCPM to ensure that you're competitive and getting competitive placements. So the best thing you can do in this case, if you can't really control the CPC, is control your CTRs. Try to be as clickable as possible, not clickbaity, because there's a difference between being clickable, interesting, intriguing, and clickbaity. But if you manage to maintain a perfect balance and you manage to deliver what advertisers are looking for post-click, you should maintain your success.
It is. And
I'm not going to spend.
So important right now. It's critical.
100%.
Beyond important. I think copy is more important than almost conversion rates is right now. We opened up a whole copywriting division because of this, and we focus so heavy on fresh and innovative copy, not ripping your competitor's exact headline and image and then saying, why the hell does my CTR suck, right? Actually trying to innovate and create some new ideas there. So you're right. It's the only way to beat this high CPCs is by having an ad that stands out.
True. So as I mentioned, I'm not going to go through every single one of the geo. I'm just going to leave it out here. You guys can always check it out later. I think the only advice I'm going to give here is develop good relationships with your sales reps and layer with your account managers, because it's not just the numbers and the traffic availability that matters in these geos, but the insights. I may not necessarily say, oh, you know what, like you shouldn't go there because we don't have traffic there. But I can say, guys, I think it makes more sense to launch in Spain right now because it's, let's say, or not launch in Spain because it's going to be a national holiday. So the chances are that people will be spending more time with their families. And, seasonally, the traffic will drop at this time. So you won't see as equally good conversion rates as you would see, let's say, a month after or even 2 weeks after. So develop good relationships with account managers because they can be proactive about these things and they can share in advance and you can plan ahead. And, what Joe's mentioned here, diversification is key as well. So don't put all the eggs in one basket. Like try the moment you feel comfortable with one geo, if you have this option. You may not have this option as a brand owner, but as an affiliate, you have more flexibility to test, split test, and scale in other geos as well. Cool. So this is a very common question, working out a test budget. I miss the good old days when, in 2018, a client would say, hey, what's the recommended budget? And I say, let's do 50K. And they'll be like, goodbye. But like now we're trying to be very mathematical about it. I've talked about this a couple of times, in other places, but I think it's the same approach for every single geo. As a rule of thumb, I think that you need to test, from 50 to 100 publishers per geo, depending obviously on the size of the geo and on the platform that you're starting with. Aim for more if you're running mobile campaigns, because naturally be more traffic, specifically because of the intent. So always account for intent, when people are interacting with ads on desktop. Chances are when they're working on mobile all the other time, especially when they're more receptive to something that's not work related. So 50, 100 publishers, about 100 clicks per publisher. Again, this is not something that's It's not something that's recommended in every single case. So don't generalize, but it's a good recommendation. You need to have 1% CVR, on average. So aim for one click to convert out of 100. So 100 clicks multiplied by the number of publishers in your testing campaign, and then multiplied by your estimated CPC. This information you can always get from your sales rep. It's in their best interest to give you the most relevant recommendation. So work with them. But keep in mind that in order to be successful, you can't just go for an average CPC per geo or per vertical. Because if everyone's doing this, no one's succeeding. So try to, account for, let's say, from 10 to 30% increase than the average CPC to be more competitive. Don't worry about overpaying because there is such thing as smart bid, which is the second price auction. If you know what's this, feel free to shoot me a message. I'll explain, or, you can always Google it. It's in our help center. But a second price auction, it saves you tons of money. So you won't be overpaying even if you set your bid as $10. But add a little bit on top, be more competitive. You can always decrease once you get the CTRs that you want. Once you get clickable, you can always decrease.
Yeah, this is really the strategy that we use. And I like that you have such a low daily test budget, because I'm not one that's in favor of let's go to $1,000 a day to test a campaign and we're just going to get data to learn, right? I think you can do a lot of things and a lot less data. So some of our biggest spending campaigns on Taboola have spent, 10, 20, 50, $100,000 a day. We might test at $100, $200 a day for the first couple of days. Then once we find our controls, we have everything in line, then I'll take that campaign, duplicate it, increase my bids by 40%, and I want to dominate that placement. But, I don't think you have to be super aggressive on your bids or your budgets to learn. And I feel that's kind of a misconception in the marketplace a little bit.
There are lots of approaches here. The most common approach is obviously running a campaign for 3 to 4 weeks, and comparing Mondays with Mondays and Tuesdays with Tuesdays to see how the audience reacts to your ads and how the campaign's improving or, on contrary, getting worse. But then there is the other approach when you're creating, let's say, tons of small campaigns, smaller spending campaigns, and you're only running them for 2-3 days, taking benefit of the creative expedition, which is the time frame when your ads are getting boosted up to 400%. So, and then this allows you to create a very small, but still an approved list or a blacklist, depending on the perception. And if you're running multiple campaigns simultaneously, that allows you to create lots of small approved lists, which combined, you can always include in your ultimate campaign, which from the very beginning will feature the approved list, which will work for it. And you'll be able to scale this particular campaign, leveraging the data collect from lots of small campaigns.
Yeah, every site has a bid that it's worth, right? And that bid might be a nickel or might be $25. It matters, per campaign, per source. But you're right. Once you get those core metrics in place, and you can understand that, hey, I can bid around 80 cents on desktop as a whole for this campaign. I want to bid up here, down here. This is my winning headline. This is my best image. Go. That's how we see campaigns really take off. But you have to, get there. It doesn't happen overnight. But the strategy of a couple $100 a day, watching it, making some tweaks, but not going too crazy is the way to do it. And then again, as you spend more and more into Taboola over the years, you start to know going into a campaign, okay, I don't want to be on these 10 publishers. Maybe I want to pre-block this one because it's never really worked out well for me. Or I want to bid down over here with a bid template. But, as a whole, I just think the strategy is phenomenal.
It's interesting because I had this conversation with someone internally today, and we actually discussed different strategies. And I think it's important to keep in mind that when we're talking about strategies, we're not just talking about leveraging data. We're talking about how our ads interact with actual internet users. So it's not just data, it's users. So, some people may say, oh, you know what, it's working out really well for me. I started breaking even the second day. Or someone says, oh, you know what, I copy pasted your campaign, did an identical thing and it's not performing well. Well, keep in mind that this is different time frames and, users tend to behave differently. So if you hear about a great tactic, feel free to test it. But keep in mind that may not necessarily work out the same way it did for the person you're listening to, because there are so many factors and you really need to be very holistic about your approach. Do some research, what's happening in the country, try to think outside the box. why some things may not be working. Like, is it good time? Is the right product fit? Maybe something's happening in the world that's affecting the performance. Or maybe simply, if you're an affiliate, your margins are different to someone who you're trying to copy, because you never know who you're competing against.
No, and staying topical is critical. One of my favorite stories of all time is early on in the pandemic, we had a client that was selling, surgical masks on Taboola. They had never
everyone did
advertised
this
on Taboola. They were one of the first ones to get in and get approved. So these guys went from having a business that nobody ever would have ran. I mean, you never would have made money selling masks on Taboola the year before, to being like a $30,000 to $40,000 a day spender, like out of nowhere. And that's just me saying, hey, these ads are being seen. And when you can put an ad out there that services a need within, a time frame where it makes sense, that ad will convert. It's just a matter of, you can't show a golf club to someone who doesn't want to buy a golf club, something to buy, right? You have to show ads of people that make sense and really do fit that need. So that story just proved to me how powerful the right campaign can be at the right time. So staying topical, I think, is critical.
Yeah, absolutely. And, there were a lot of people promoting masks throughout the whole 2020 and even a bit in 21, based on where there were some local restrictions. But the guys who entered the market at the very beginning, they're probably buying 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 Maseratis every day.
Yeah, that's crazy. Client was very early on. They were one of the first to get approved. And again, the campaign was just easy. Like, this worked everywhere. Like, there was a huge need for this in the country, and it just worked everywhere they put the ad. So
even now, we'll see what's going to happen. There are so many talks right now about the second wave, but we're not going to get into this.
Yeah, of course.
That's just too much for discussion. That's same topical, exactly. Cool. So moving on. I feel like we spend a lot of time on basics. I want to spend a bit of time on the landing page best practices. Again, I'm not going to go through all the text here. I try to include as much information as possible for the majority of you guys to study. For those of you who know this, wonderful. For those of you who don't know this and want to ask questions, again, feel free to shoot after the webinar or during the Q&A session. But again, it's for you to use. The rule of thumb to keep in mind when you're creating your copy is that you really need to be very specific with your message. So, don't try to spread it across the whole page. Always think like a consumer, like yourself, because we all are consuming content as well. We just look at it from the professional standpoint in most of the cases. But when I'm, let's say you're opening a book. I don't have a book right now with me, but you're opening a book. Like, how much time does it take you to understand, like, whether you like this book or not? Well, probably, it takes you a couple of pages. And if there is an anchor, if there is something that hooks you, and you enjoy the book, you're like, all right, like, maybe I'm not understanding everything what's going on there, but at least I'm interested. I'm keen to learn what's going to happen next in the next chapter, in the next couple of pages. So when you're starting with your copy, and I'm not talking about the ads at this stage, I'm talking about the actual landing page or pre-landing page, the first question you should answer is, what's the problem? If your ad is presenting a problem, is saying thousands of people in your city are choosing these face masks, be the first to learn about them. Or obviously not the first, because there's thousands of people buying it, but let's say, be the first this January to buy them with a 15% discount, whatever. You're presenting internet consumer with a dilemma. They're like, all right, there are 10,000 of people who already bought this mask and I've never heard about it. It's a problem. And the moment they open the landing page, they should see a summary of the problem. It would be like, okay, well, yeah, there are 10,000 people who are in your city who already bought this mask and they're super satisfied. And then,
this is great, Andre. So I'm not even gonna cut you off. This is just, I think content is critical for native to work, right? So whenever I do like a mastermind or a talk, we always go over this exact thing. And I always tell people, when someone hits your landing page, you got roughly 15 to a maximum of 30 seconds to sell them the product. Yep. If that first third of that article, that first couple of sentences is boring, then you're going to lose them immediately. So first couple of sentences is going to be draw them in. Then you have kind of your fluff in the middle, which is going to be your selling points and your important aspects and all that. And then you got to close that page hard too, with a clear call to action. Because I think so many people put out really poor copy and really poor landing pages. And then they wonder why they're not working. Why am I not selling this product? Why am I not getting the leads in house? When the truth to be told, your pages are structured properly, and there's really no sell or call to urgency behind the product. So I think this is super important because copy is absolutely critical right now. Again, more so than I've ever seen it be in the past.
And I really like your point about 7 seconds. I think those of you who are listening to this and watching, and you're doing, let's say, YouTube ads or Facebook ads, something social and video related, you definitely remember this videos which were saying, if you give me 5 seconds, I'm going to tell you how to make $1 million. So that's not something you should try running on Taboola, but you should, come up with something that creates similar intent, similar interest. Like you shouldn't obviously promise the users to immediately become millionaires. This is not something that's going to pass the moderation and the CRT policy, but this is the approach you should think of when you're creating your copy. Define the problem with your ads, summarize the problem with your copy, and then come up with a solution. Why this problem needs to be solved, how your product can solve it, and why should they take the action now? So if I was to summarize this, problem, solution at a discount just for you and just today. If you implement this approach, you are very close to being successful. Like, I'm not saying this is like something that's going to 100% guarantee success, but let's call it the ingredient for the secret sauce.
It is. And I like the point too about, yes, you're solving the problem, but you're not misleading them on the problem. You're not going to tell them, hey, this product is going to make you grow 6 inches in height and, lose 200 pounds by tomorrow. You have to be, educated in how you're doing this, create realistic expectations that are going to solve a real problem for somebody. And I think that's just the difference in the marketplace is people are so lazy and make these huge fake claims and consumers can see right through them. Like they know that, I'm not going to get a $200,000 check from the government if I sign up for this program tomorrow or whatever the case may be. So A, it's obviously, misleading consumers in a big way, but B, it's creating no long-term success for anybody. So, good copy with clear call to actions and solving a real problem is really the difference we've seen internally.
Absolutely. And also, it's still with a long-term approach because it's no longer let's say 2012 or 2015. I'm getting lots of comments, people being upset that it's no longer these times because at that time consumers were a lot less educated about the promises being made on the internet. Now it's been past that. It's been 10 years since that time. So consumers are a lot more educated. They don't want to be deceived. And even if you succeed in deceiving them and you're selling them something that you don't really need at this stage or at this moment, they will remember that. And then there will be word of mouth. This word of mouth, they won't be returning customers. There are multiple problems this deceitful approach may create. So always aim for something that's fundamental and long-term. And with your copy, try to deliver what you're promising. So, try to be creative, but not deceitfully creative. And keep it short, straight to the point, spice it up with an image, keep it clean, keep it simple, make it readable. There are a lot of things you can split test with the layout of your page, but always think in terms of post-click performance. Okay, you've demonstrated the problem. You've summarized the problem. What's next? It's very important to also track these things. So not just include a pixel on the thank you page. Include a pixel on a call to action. And by the way, it's important to include the call to action split tested, but the best recommendation is to include the call to action closer to the bottom of the page. Because this is the way you are not guaranteeing, but getting close to guaranteeing that the user first familiarizes themselves with the content that they're reading. So you're not just getting accidental clicks. You're getting the users who, they got interested in the problem. They've learned about the solution. They're warmed up. They're ready to buy it. So this is how you're sort of narrowing down the funnel, and they're taking them by hand and taking down the corridor to the moment when they're ready to buy something from you or, leave their email, regardless of whatever you're doing. So keep these things in mind.
Yeah, you're right. And, one thing we noticed too, and this is more for brands and less for affiliates, I apologize, but if you're selling a product online and it's an expensive product or even a mediocre product, and let's say Taboola, drives that user's initial click and they're reading about the product and interested in all that, there's nothing to say that users can go to Google and type in that product on Google to research more, or maybe go to Amazon and look for a coupon code, or maybe go, to another source, or maybe go to Facebook and see a remarketing ad. So even though you may not see the sale from the Taboola pixel, Taboola may very well have had an important part of that chain of events that led up to that conversion. There's no great way to track that right now. I mean, cohort attribution models are out there, but there's no perfect way to track it. But I know the brands that we work with always see a huge surge in like branded search sales and like Facebook remarketing sales and Amazon sales as we scale the campaign effectively for native. And there's no great way to track that currently, but it's such an important piece of the puzzle for brands out there. And again, affiliates, I'm sorry, you don't get credit for those, but the brands 100% benefit from it.
I think with affiliates is I work with so many affiliates who started with drop shipping because they were just trying to figure out what they would like to affiliate with. And then they actually get affiliated with a brand or a CPA network. And then eventually some of them who are particularly successful, they will accumulate some money and they will be able to start their own business, set up their own company, buy products from China, stock them somewhere in Europe, and then promote them across the countries. So there's even in every affiliate, there is an opportunity, to become a brand owner. So I think this could be relevant for everyone.
So my biggest clients were at one time just pulling affiliate links from ClickBank. Now they own products and they're, and they're all super successful with it. But you're absolutely right. And I only meant that from, the day one type things. But, you're learning, you're innovating, you're getting good at what you do. You're sharpening your craft. And then anyone that gets successful at that, of course, want to own their own business, selling their own products. So yeah, some of my biggest spending clients, again, were once an affiliate pulling a Click booth or a ClickBank ad.
Cool. Yeah. We also work with a lot of affiliates working with ClickBank and other CPA networks. Cool. So we talked about the copy. We talked about the CTAs, do's and don'ts. Lots of text here. I'm not going to go through every single
can you make this available too, Andre, this presentation, if people want to actually go through this?
Like, yeah, sure. Absolutely. You know what we can do? So obviously the majority of you have signed up for this webinar, and you've also clicked that you're okay to be contacted. So how about the following? Joe, do you have an option to outreach everyone through some CRM tool, as in like send a newsletter with this available?
I do. So two things, one, if you want a copy of this, just make a comment on the page, put, in or something like that, on there. We'll get you a copy. Two, if you signed up, you have a website out there on ROI Marketplace. There's a link for the webinar sign up. I will email those people as well. We can get you a copy.
I think it's a great idea.
Go through it all.
I think it's a great idea. We can do it as well. But like with you having all these emails, you can send everyone a newsletter containing this presentation. Obviously, everyone's a little bit hectic due to Christmas, and if you're not celebrating Christmas, it's still the end of the new year, so things are a little bit busy. So it's worth familiarizing yourself with the deck, and we can always have a one-on-one conversation after the holidays. So no rush here.
There's so much stuff on here that I know people are trying to probably take notes and write stuff down and take screenshots. But
yeah, don't worry, guys.
If you want it, we'll get it to you.
This is available. But yeah, like these two slides, I have it here. This is just general recommendation to adjust your copy for Taboola sponsored content, specifically if you're working with different traffic platforms. So I mentioned, for instance, if you're running YouTube, you're already familiar with how to capture the attention from the very beginning, from the very first seconds. Native is no different. And, regardless whether you're doing TikTok, Twitter, displaying Facebook, there are always ways to repurpose your copy and make it relevant for native. And trust me, in most of the cases, it's not even hard work. Like you already have everything. Sometimes it's just the format that needs to be twitched a little bit. And sometimes it's the copy specifically for ads that needs to be adjusted a little bit. Make it more native. Excuse the pun. But like,
don't be more native.
Yeah, native. Don't be too salesy, because on Facebook there is one type of intent. People are receptive to this thing. They're like, okay, there's a bunch of recommendations, and we're so used to seeing ads somewhere between us. But native, people are reading the news, and they'll be like, all right, I can definitely recognize when someone's trying to sell me things or when someone's trying to recommend me things. There's a fundamental difference. So rather than trying just to say, okay, buy it right now, which may be a good call to action, that may not necessarily work for every single case. Sometimes people are just reading news and they want to see more news. And then so it happens, if the news tend to sell them something that they may find relevant, well, happy days. But
yeah, I would say
relevant and don't oversell.
That's probably the biggest, thing we see that brands and, direct clients make the mistake of is they just take their top ads from Facebook, copy and paste them into Taboola and say, well, it's not working. It's a whole different sales cycle. So you can learn from it. You can take images and get some ideas from it, but it's not a copy and paste type situation where it's just going to work. You have to, again, native it up a little bit. It's a whole different mindset for the consumer.
Yeah. Gosh, it's so hot sitting in this hat. I was trying to be Christmassy, but no, too much. It's too hot. I'm gonna be just with my headphones on. So sorry guys for being Grinch. Cool. So I'm gonna leave it out here. Check it out later. Now we can finally move on to some examples of the verticals and LPs to run in Q1. So something that I mentioned, something that's very specific to Q1 or something that's evergreen. Joe, do we have, by the way, any questions at this stage for the previous part of the presentation?
Nothing crazy yet. There's a couple small questions here. We can cover those towards the end, but
all right, sure.
Yeah,
so nothing like specific that needs addressing immediately. All right, cool.
Nope. People want to know where they get the presentation. Someone asked a question about conversion rates of buying directly from Taboola versus using programmatic. I don't think you probably had those numbers right in front of you.
Yeah, like I don't have this. I think it's a very, very specific question. Like we would need to. No, let me rephrase this. It's a very broad question, not a specific one. It's specific and broad at the same time. Specific, this is something I don't have in front of me, but broad as in like programmatic. Which programmatic platform are we talking about? Which vertical? Which geo? Which product are we talking about? So this is something that needs a bit of narrowing down. So if you can narrow it down by the end of these slides, let's try again. But I'll do my best to address this question.
And again, people can leave, questions here, and Andre is a member of the group, so he can go back in a later point and get you more specific data if you guys really need something. So if he can't answer it today, he'll answer it for you, hopefully, down the road.
Cool. Yeah, absolutely. Cool stuff. So verticals to explore, I think, starting with the evergreen one. This is content arbitrage. This is one of the oldest forms of arbitrage. You have a website, you monetize this. This is evergreen, but keep in mind that it's very trend dependent, and content tends to have very short lifespan because you can't just. I mean, in some cases you can recycle the same type of content for a very long time, but especially if you're buying large volumes of traffic, the chances are the audience may get tired of it at some point. So you need to swap it with something a bit more recent, especially if there's something happening in the world and there are ways to capitalize on it. Give it a try. But keep in mind, there are like two levels of content arbitrage. There's the beginner type of content arbitrage when you're buying extremely cheap CPCs, less than 1 cent. And then you're getting like 1 or 2 cents return from AdSense. This is very common for Eastern Europeans, in my experience. They tend to do this, but if you want to go for something high level, don't just stop with AdSense. Implement some programmatic partners, AdX, Criteo. There are so many of them. Try different approaches. You can obviously go for carousels. You can go for long reads, split test different placements and see what's working best for you. And, don't forget to use Taboola for your monetization partner as well. But there's also search arbitrage, which is a similar form of arbitrage where you have lots of small running campaigns, which cumulatively have a massive ad spend. And I have some clients who are spending 5 digits daily easily on this globally, not just in the States. And there are multiple providers, search feed providers, which some of you may know or may not know. But again, let's take this offline. But generally, it looks like you have a Google or Yahoo feed, search feed, and you're driving affordable, cheap traffic to this feed, and you're getting payouts from intermediaries that work with Google and Yahoo. And the idea is to get higher payouts than the investment you put in the clicks. But this is very research dependent. You can't just run the same dental for ages, dental keywords. Like try to find something that is country specific or dental trend implants. Specific. Yeah, this is something that everyone's starting with because they tend to have very high payouts and they seem to work for everyone, specifically in countries that require, mentality-wise to have a very nice smile, specifically in the States. Like it may not necessarily be the case in the UK. People are a bit less, care less about this. And in the US, this is a big thing. Yep. So keep this in mind when you're running something country specific. Now, moving on to affiliates from arbitragers, obviously health and supplements, they tend to be evergreen, but specifically good in January because people are thinking about New Year resolutions. They're like, oh, I had so much on Christmas, like I'm so full, but I promise 23 is going to be different. And so it happens, if you come at the right time with your recommendation, you'd be like, guys, here's an amazing FDA approved cream or for your joints, or amazing FDA approved, I don't know, dieting powder. What was it? Green matcha or whatever that everyone used to run a couple of years ago. Even now, if it's trialed clinically, if it's FDA approved, go for it. There's so many CPA networks that have them pre-approved with us and with FDA, so no problem running those. E-commerce, I would say standalone products, they're evergreen, especially if you tie them to holiday seasons. Let's say St. Valentine's, because now it's a little late to run Christmas stuff. Maybe like late Christmas shopping, potentially, but not so much. But think St. Valentine's, like top 10 best products for your loved one. If you're running a listicle, for instance, or let's say one amazing product that you should buy your loved one for St. Valentine's. Like, try to be gender neutral at first, then gather some insights, see what's performing best, for male, female, whatever works. And then eventually try to tailor it to the audience that you're selling to. But, try to stay broad initially. Don't assume that, let's say, females are buying more than males. Not necessarily, it could be vice versa. It could be both at the same time. Like, try to rely on data here. Insurance. This is something that's particularly US specific, because this is actually a good example of something that requires a bit of research. The reason insurance is so big in the US in Q1 is because this is the time where when the users are switching providers and they're getting big premiums for switching them. So this is why everyone's starting to run insurance lead gen at this time, because they want more people to switch, because everyone's making money in this chain. So keeping this in mind, if you've done your research, if you know that's a good time to start preparing for Q1 lead gen, do it. And there are other lead gen that are very season specific, like solar, for instance. There's no point trying to promote solar when it's cold. Like, you may say, okay, let's prepare in advance. But the intent behind this is different. If I'm in the UK and it's -15 degrees Celsius. Sorry for you guys who don't understand.
Metric system.
Huh?
The metric system. Gotta love it.
Yeah, the metric. So I don't know how much is in Fahrenheit, but let's say 15 degrees in my apartment. Outside, it's like 0. Like, am I going to think about solar panels? No, I'm going to think about a heater. So try to sell me a heater and you'll get your results. But when it's starting to get sunny, when it's getting warmer, and when the electricity bills are off the roof, you'll go, all right, like, I want to save some money. How can I do this? And here you guys come saying like, well, 10,000 guys in your city are saving this amount of money using solar panels. So here it comes. Right time, right place. By the way, speaking of home improvement, it's getting cold, again, in the UK, based in the UK. So what can you do if you can't really afford electricity? Or you can, but you don't want to be spending too much? Isolation, isolate your roof, isolate your walls, change doors, get some plumbers to fix your pipes for you and get you cold water, or, I don't know, fix heating, whatever. But think in terms of what can improve people's lives and what can be relevant for them right now. So if
I had a great
give them a good
for isolation in France a couple of years ago. That thing spent like crazy. There was a government program in France where they would do something. There's some kind of, motion to insulate your home. Man, that thing was awesome. It converted everywhere. It was a super profitable campaign, and it was, again, more wide.
How fortunate my colleagues from France are. They must have closed their quotas in like 2 days.
Yeah, I think it went quick. I think it went very quick. We were driving a lot of leads, so
thank you,
funny
Joe.
to say that.
Thank you. No, cool. So yeah, that's a good example, actually. Isolation, France. I think in France the situation now is a bit better. So it's, again, the matter of research. In France, they're being heavily subsidized by the government when it comes to electricity. But let's say the same provider, EDF, they're setting much higher prices in the UK because the government does subsidize, but not as much as in France, for instance. So the price can go like up to 200% versus a couple of percent in France. So study this and make some research and use the conclusions in your favor. Financial is a good one. You can think about investment. The majority of you would think, okay, well, people barely have money for electricity. Why would they run investment? But think in these terms, like during crisis and recession, money do not disappear. They just accumulate in a different place. And by the way, money keeps being printed every single day. But even if we put this part aside, money do not disappear like that. They just flow from lots of pockets in few pockets. So the job is to find these few pockets and target them with a relevant proposition they wouldn't be able to refuse. So if you find the right pocket that, let's say, holds lots of money, what they would think about? Well, they would think about how they can multiply this money, make them work for them. So try to sell them investments. Say, guys, so it happens if you bought Amazon. Well, Amazon's not a good example because yesterday they actually stopped being $1 trillion company. But let's say something else, whatever, Netflix. There are speculations that they're being bought by Microsoft. So try this instead. Say if you bought Netflix 5 years ago with an investment of $1,000, and by the way, be reasonable. Don't overpromise. Rather stay on the educational side of things, because you wouldn't be able to pass the policy in this case. But like if you're being educational, if you just laying data out there and say, well, if you bought back then, so it happens now you would be a millionaire. So it doesn't mean that you will be a millionaire if you buy right now, but the conclusions are for you to make. So
no, you're right. Some of my biggest spending clients this year have been in the financial space, and it's alternative investments. People that are looking to diversify away from the stock market. So with this recession looming, people are scared about their investments. They're looking for ways to diversify their portfolios, and that creates opportunity, right?
Absolutely.
To service those services that maybe weren't as relevant again a couple of years ago. So that's all about, as you mentioned, staying topical and understanding that, maybe I shouldn't push a stock promotion right now because no one's really buying the stocks up like they were, 3 years ago. But what are they investing in, and where can I service an ad that makes the most sense for that consumer?
Yeah, I saw this really cool campaigns promoting investing in whiskey. Like I have a friend in London who invests in bottles of wine.
Okay.
She buys these bottles for like a couple of hundred. So she's not promoting this on Taboola. She's just doing it herself, but she's like buying fancy bottles of wine from France, and they cost a couple of hundred. And she told me, like, Andre, I bought this bottle 2 years ago. Now it costs something like $2,000. I'm like, seriously, X5 in 2 years? She's like, that's crazy for me. And there's also art, there's wine, there's whiskey. I saw some whiskey campaigns on Taboola, like investing in whiskey, and they deliver something like 12% a year, which is in some cases outrunning inflation, which is good. So that's something worth exploring.
Just can't drink the profits.
Yeah, you can't drink the profits. Or maybe you can celebrate, like, all right, here's my profits. Christmas time, guys. And just to conclude, I'm going to give a couple of examples, but I'm not going to spend too much time with them because we're running out of time. But betting, like with World Cup, we may be late. For those of you who made a bet on Argentina a couple of months ago, kudos to you. Well done. You're probably buying a second house right now. But with World Cup, it's gone. But there are lots of other events happening. Maybe not necessarily as big ones, but check what's happening in the markets. And if you have a CPA network that's working with some gambling providers, check out that they have a license. And if they're licensed, there's no problem running. We're working with quite a few of them. I'm not going to mention names right now, but betting is allowed on Taboola, as well as investing, provided that it is licensed. So let's have this conversation if you think that you have the right license for your chosen geo.
I love it.
Now, a few examples. So I promised search arbitrage. So this is how your Google/Yahoo feeds look like. So you drive to our keyword box page, and then it takes you to a landing page that looks like a search feed. Content arbitrage looks similar to this. So heavily monetized pages with lots of programmatic and native at the bottom. But again, it depends on the layout that you're using. It can be a carousel with lots of click next, relying on lots of impressions. Or it can be a long read with lots of mid articles and a looming video ad to the highest RPM. You have e-commerce, which looks like this. This is something the majority of you are familiar with. So you have an ad presenting a problem. You have a landing page talking about the solution. And then you have the landing page that comes after a pre-landing page that sells you a bundle of solutions at a very nice discount. Then you have insurance that looks similar to this. very similar approach, and you can experiment with funnels. There can be quizzes, there can be lead generation, there can be comparison websites. The purpose is to collect leads. You may have home improvement. Looks similar to this again. Content with problem solving, and then lead generation that may be spiced up with a bit of quiz just to make sure that they are targeting relevant audience. Because if you're an affiliate, you're only being paid for the relevant audiences and relevant leads. So if you really would like to narrow it down to compensate for the lack of precise targeting options like you would get on social, which are walled gardens, the best way to narrow down is to leverage content and some creative practices like quizzes, for instance. And you can always say like, oh, sorry, like, thanks for completing the quiz. Unfortunately, you do not qualify. So this way, like, you don't generate and sell the leads which are irrelevant to your CPA network or direct partner. Mortgages. Like, it may not be a great time to get a mortgage in Europe right now, at least in the UK, with rates going above the roof. But like, who knows? Things may change in the next couple of months or years. Who knows? Probably not years, but hopefully in months. Like, when the prices drop, eventually there'll be more buyers willing to enter. So worth keeping in mind. I think that's it.
Sweet.
Let me check.
So this is awesome.
1 second.
So once more for those
that's it.
Any questions you have, post them. We can answer those. Even if you watch this later, this is going to stay on the group for the unforeseeable future.
Forever.
Then post questions on there as well. We can kind of go over them. But again, this is super helpful, Andre. This is just great content. I think
really appreciate this.
Cool. I don't see any more questions that popped up, but so one question that I want to ask, and I think you and I talked about this a little bit online. So everybody saw the news. Yahoo and Taboola have some kind of collaboration going. I know you don't know the specifics, but it's got to be exciting there. Can you tell us what you know and kind of what can we expect in the next year or so?
I think the baseline is we're all incredibly excited internally, and I'm sure lots of people externally are excited as well, because like, if we put all the PR aside, the raw fact is we're going to have a lot more premium traffic, which is awesome.
Love it.
When it's going to happen, I genuinely don't know. So they've announced this. We've learned about it a little before the public announcement. So we celebrate a little and then we put it out there. So I think we don't have the integration right now. So if you're buying Yahoo Gemini, feel free to continue doing so. Eventually, I assume there will be some integration that will merge two platforms. Again, I don't know this, but there should be some sort of integration to allow Taboola users, Taboola clients, to buy Yahoo's traffic, which would be Yahoo Finance, Yahoo Properties, which is incredibly exciting. Yeah, like I don't want either, because like, this is something what we talked about earlier during this webinar is I'm not saying that we're inventory constrained. We have tons of traffic in the US, but with so many new advertisers, launching, being signed, it's only natural that the CPCs will go up because there is more competition. So with more inventory, I think the prices, it's again my assumption, but it seems logical that with more inventory but the same amount of advertisers, we should get a deflation in CPCs at least a little bit. Like, I don't have the estimates, but I think it's going to happen. So if I was to summarize, tons of traffic in the US and potentially globally, but predominantly in the US based on my Gemini experience.
Yeah, I love it. And I think you're right. Right now we're all fighting for MSN. Now we're all going to be fighting for MSN and Yahoo, and then other sources as well. Not that that's all that Taboola has, but people want MSN for whatever reason. I think the point and the takeaway is compliance. Nobody knows yet when it's available. Nobody knows yet what kind of ads are going to be allowed. Nobody knows yet, but it's coming. And we can't wait to make it happen. And, Andre will be part of the group. So as more information breaks, he will let us know. And, we'll try to get people the information as early as possible.
Absolutely.
For sure.
Yeah, we have a lot of other reps in the group as well. As watchers, they're quietly watching. But I think, again, if you have any questions, feel free to shoot in the group, or if you want to have a profound conversation, keep in mind that I'm taking care of the clients who are sitting in Eastern Europe and in Israel. If you want to have a profound conversation, we can either have a one-on-one, or you can shoot me a message on LinkedIn, email, Facebook group. And I can always, if I can't help you myself, like especially if you're just getting started, I can always point you in the direction of my amazing colleagues who are responsible for your respective market, and they'll be able to take over the conversation and help you get things going.
I love it. Cool. Anyway, we're about at our hour mark, guys. That's all I have. Andre, don't you want to cover while we have the group, or?
No, like honestly, I personally don't have any questions for everyone. I just want to thank everyone for watching. I don't know how many people are watching or will watch, but regardless, thanks so much for listening. Hopefully this was relevant. Some of this material you may be familiar with based on your experience or based on watching some previous webinars, but I try to spice things up with some new content, and I'll continue doing so. And any questions, feel free to reach out. But meanwhile, I can just wish everyone a very happy Christmas and Happy New Year.
Awesome. Well, thank you again. Merry Christmas.
I'm not wearing my hat though, but
Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. Looking forward to Q1. And again, thank you for all this. It's just great. So
thanks a lot to everyone. Joe, thanks a lot to you specifically.
Thank you. Talk soon. Bye.
Speak soon.